Bagels and porridge are not the order of the day, unless, of course, you're talking about the government's plan to ban advertising of them, along with a lot of other things, which I'll talk about in this video. And that also led me to think about the free breakfast clubs rollout, because it doesn't usually take long to find something wrong with that. I'll also talk a little bit about that in this video. But first of all, if you're new to me, I'm Daniel Shunsmith, a barrister of England and Wales. I'd be really grateful if you hit the subscribe button. I know I keep asking, but it's the difference between a few hundred and a few thousand of you subscribe, and I depend on you, the viewer, to do that because I don't have anyone else pushing me here. I am solo, and I have been for over 4 years now, with a few thousand videos in tow. So check out the library and please do subscribe. So what are we talking about here? You heard me correctly. The government is banning, that's not necessarily a bad thing, you understand, but the government is banning advertising within certain time frames. I think it's 5:30 in the morning till 9 at night or something like that. So they're literally pushing advertising of these kind of things to the after hours. So you can only watch adverts for these if they're early hours in the morning, those of you that are still awake. But you can see from this list here, bagels are among the things that are being banned. Sandwiches of any kind, including baguettes, ciabattas, wraps, filled muffins, buns, baps, croissants, filled croissants, toasties, paninis, even breaded or battered fish and shellfish and like fish fingers and whatever. All sorts of things here. Ice cream, lollies, cakes, cupcakes. So this got me to thinking there's got to be a little something here to do with the breakfast clubs. Now, first, let's just recap the law a little bit more. So, as I say, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not going to go all nutritionist on you because I don't hold myself out as a proper nutritionist either. But the science has it very, very broadly speaking. It's calories in, calories out. There's a little bit more to it than that. But if you don't eat loads of junk food, you don't gain weight and get obese. That's a large summary of the situation here. But obviously, take your own nutrition advice. But the government is banning the advertising on junk food to curb childhood obesity. Now, call me somewhat cynical. I do somewhat put this down to parents parenting the children, but maybe I'm a little bit old school in that sense, in that I think the children should really be following the guidance of mum and dad or guardian or whomever, and therefore be under control and not gain too much weight. But enough said about that. I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives. But back to the legislation. The government, as I said, is determined to ensure that children will no longer be exposed to TV adverts for junk food products, as new law set out yesterday, which will come into play October next year, banning adverts between 5:30 and 9 p.m. Now, this is being inserted into the Communications Act of 2003. Now, let me just step back a moment from all this. One of the reasons I'm talking to you about this, some people may say he's having a go at the government again. Well, this is law. The government makes the law, and so I'm telling you about the law and something that I think you really ought to know about. I mean, at the moment, you are always told what to think and how to think sometimes and how to feel sometimes. In fact, if you take a look at this, this morning it said, it's 2 degrees outside, but it feels like -5. So it's even telling me how I should feel without going outside. And it didn't feel like -5. I know what -5 feels like, but it didn't feel like -5. But one of the reasons I'm telling you about all this is I had to go through a bit of a rabbit hole to find all this information and go through this analysis. And I think it's interesting, and I'd like to share it with you. So as I said, this is inserted into the Communications Act of 2003, Section 368FA, advertising of less healthy food and drink. So they're calling it less healthy food and drink, as opposed to unhealthy, as opposed to junk food. They've gone with less healthy food and drink. Go figure. From the beginning of the 1st of October 2025, on-demand program services must not, between 5:30 and 9 p.m., include adverts for identifiably less healthy food or drink product. Now, that in itself is interesting because when we come to the categories and stuff over here, and we look at how they're calculated, less healthy food or drinks products, for the purposes of these sections, for the advertising sections, a product is less healthy food or drink if it falls within one of the categories set out in paragraphs 2 to 7 of the schedule, which I'll show you in a minute. Actually, I showed you briefly before, and I'll show you again in a minute. And is not an exempt product within the meaning of paragraph 1 of that schedule. The score, this is how they work them out. The score for the product when the nutrient profiling model is applied to it, in accordance with the nutrient profiling technical guidance, which I also found, so I'll come back to that in a moment. If the score of said product is 4 points or more, in the case of a product which is not a drink, some might call that food, or 1 point or more if in the case that a product is a drink. So if it's a drink. And products within these categories set out in schedules are less healthy food or drink products, whether they are sold for consumption at home or elsewhere. So that led me to thinking, well, how does this apply with these breakfast clubs? So we've got a detailed profiling, which I'll go through in a minute, of how you work out or try to work out. Again, with the caveat, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not going to make statements of fact here. I'm just going to roughly look at this table. I haven't spent long enough on it to say this is the definitive word on whether or not this product is or is not a less healthy product. So just to caveat that, this is just a rough go within 2 or 3 minutes that I have to make this video, whether or not this is a less healthy product. But back to the law for a moment. So this is inserted into the Communications Act here. By these regulations, the Advertising Less Healthy Food Definitions and Exemptions Regulations of 2024, and it inserts these sections and provides the categories. That's the categories that I've got in this separate document here. Now, what got me to thinking is, what about these breakfast clubs? Because the government is hell-bent on doing these free breakfast clubs for kids across the country. Now, I don't for a moment suggest that this is a bad idea to assist those that cannot afford the breakfast. There's all sorts of question marks over if breakfast is provided for free at school, won't the parents just spend the money on something else? Other arguments that I've heard, you understand people saying, why don't the parents pay for the breakfast for the children because they've had the children, so they should be able to pay for the breakfast for the children or cut down on spending elsewhere. Or if not, then if they are on benefits, then those benefits should be sufficient to cover the breakfast, and all sorts of arguments as to why this shouldn't have to be in place in the first place. And I understand that the funding for this only runs until I think the middle of next year. I'll stand to be corrected, but from the last I read a lot, as you probably gather. From the last I remember, the funding for this program is only in place until the middle of next year. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please, and I'll stand to be corrected. But these breakfast clubs, providing breakfast for children, so great idea if there's really a need for it. As I said, there are arguments as to why there should not be a need for it. There's arguments that it's a good idea to ensure those children have got breakfasts in the morning and so on. Not going to get into the politics of that, believe it or not, I promise you, or the morale, the ethics of all of that. But I did want to look at it because, at least briefly, in relation to this law, because it says here, what does the current breakfast club offer? And it says, in England, schools with at least 40% of pupils from income-deprived areas can receive a subsidy covering 3/4 of food and delivery costs under this programme. 12% of state schools in England currently take part in the scheme, funding for which ends in July 2025. Outside these publicly funded breakfast clubs, several charities such as Magic Breakfast support or deliver breakfast clubs, and some schools pay for clubs out of their own budgets, primary schools, etc., etc. So one of whom is Magic Breakfast. So then I looked at Magic Breakfast. Now, this is no criticism of Magic Breakfast. I'm sure that everything that they do is fantastic, so please do not take this as a criticism of them at all. It is not intended to be. I'm just going down this rabbit hole of, right, they are providing these breakfast clubs. One of the providers is Magic Breakfast. What do they provide? And what are the advertisements? Because these laws are going to look at the advertisements. And so I found one of the pamphlets, Magic Breakfast, Fuel for Learning. Sure enough, one of the children is eating a bagel. And another one of the children here is eating a bowl of something. I'm not sure what that is. And the next picture is also a child eating a bagel. I'm sure there's probably a few more there. If we look through and we find something else, Weetabix, I don't know whether that would come on this list or not. It looks like it's the fruit kind from the blurred image in the background. So you'd have to go through all of those products and determine whether or not they are less healthy food. Now, when I looked at the website, coming back to the website for Magic Breakfast, it says, here's a taster of what's on the menu. Bagels supplied by New York Bakery. Now, these are fantastic bagels. I love those bagels. It's not a sponsor video, obviously, but I love those bagels, and they are over here. Assuming for a moment that they supply the original. I'm just taking this as a pure example. I decline the extra cookies. Purely taking this as an example, based on nutritional facts, this is the profiling that this technical guidance goes through. It's based on the energy it provides, the saturated fats, carbohydrates, sugars, protein, salt, etc. You take all of those and you move over to this technical document here, which is the technical profiling guidance, which I don't know if this is an up-to-date one or what, but let's just assume for a moment this is an up-to-date one. And actually, just a quick diversion, I paused and then checked and looked in here. This is what a lawyer does. We find something, we go, oh, let's take a look at that first. So within these advertising less healthy food definitions and exemptions regulations 2024, we look down here, it says in the definitions, the interpretation of the Act, the nutrient profiling technical guidance means the guidance with the title published the Department of Health on the 1st of January 2011. And so it appears that the one that I found is the correct one. So coming back to page 5, this is where we work out the nutrient profiling of said product. Now, just as a reminder, I was looking at the standard original bagel from New York Bakery, which on the face of it is possibly one of those supplied to Magic Breakfast, which is one of the providers for these breakfast clubs, which are being put on by Labour. And now considering this in light of the banning of advertising for these products. And I'll come back to why I'm talking about it all in a minute. So taking these nutritional facts here, we've got energy in kilojoules at 1140. That puts it above 1005 in the energy category. So we get 3 points. So you add these points up in the first table. Then we're going to deduct the points in the next table, depending on whether it adds up to 11 points or not. But we'll add these up and deduct the next one. So we've got 3 points for the energy. Then we're going to look for saturated fat. So we come back to here and it's got all of these out of 100 grams. We've got 0.8 grams of saturated fat. This column is measured in grams, so we are very low on that scale here. So we're under 1 gram of saturated fat. So there are no points in this part of the calculation for the saturated fat. Let's move on to sugars. Sugars, we've got 5.5 grams out of every 100 grams. So that's more than 4.5, but not more than 9. So we get 1 point for that one. And the sodium, we've got more than, I think it's 600 and something, more than 540 milligrams. So we get 6 points for that. So we've got 10 points in this first table. Then we go to this bottom table here and we look at whether it's got any fruit, vegetables and nuts, how much fiber it's got. Now, these two types of fiber, I admit I had no idea of the difference between them. My cursory research suggests that the AOAC fiber is better because it's supposed to be a better way of gaining your fiber in your diet. And we scored 4 points on that one. And the protein is more than 8 grams, so we get 5 for that one. So according to this, you take 5 and 4, which is 9. You deduct that from the 10, that gives us 1. And that suggests that this by itself apparently is not a less healthy food. So coming back to the regulations here, we can go down, remind ourselves that less healthy food or drink products are those that have 4 or more points in the case of a product which is not a drink, i.e. food of some sort, 1 in the case where it is a drink. And these apply to all of the categories, including all of these sort of things here. So it's not an outright ban, as it might at first seem. But sure enough, in category 13E, we do see bagels, filled muffins, filled buns, baps, filled croissants, etc. So any kind of sandwich, including baguettes, ciabattas, wraps, bagels. These are all included in these regulations, so long as they score 4 or more points in the case of those products. Now, it would appear, on the face of it, if I've done this correctly, that this standard bagel here, the original from New York Bakery, which are fantastic, by the way, not a sponsored video, but wow, these bagels would appear not to be a less healthy product. So commendations there for Magic Breakfast if that's what they're supplying. But then just briefly coming back to this brochure here, it does show what appears to be the New York Bakery bagel. Can't really tell. I would presume that it is, but there's also something on it. So that raises the question, if they've put something on it that makes it less healthy. Let's say they stack a load of cheese on top of it. That probably would then score more points and be less healthy. And in any event, of course, that is not directly relevant to these regulations because these are talking about on-demand program services, not between the hours of 5:30 in the morning and 9 p.m. at night, include advertisements for identifiable less healthy food and drink products. So they're banning of these things on TV, but at the same time, there's a question mark at the very least as to whether what's being provided at these breakfast clubs qualifies for the same thing that they are banning TV adverts for. There remains the question of whose job is it to ensure that children are receiving healthy food? Now, there may well be an obesity problem, there may well be a health problem. And of course, I am all for people getting the right information, the right messages, and perhaps it is right that these kind of adverts for really unhealthy products to be banned. And so in a very long-winded way, this is also a bit of raising awareness to you of to just be aware of what you are eating, what you are buying, what you see on TV advertised, because these things are being banned. They are being banned for a reason. All jokes aside, we know it, there are less healthy products out there. There are lots of less healthy junk food, less healthy junk drinks. But I just wanted to share with you my little thought process that I went through. It didn't take me more than a few minutes, but I thought I would share it with you anyway, because when I saw these regulations, I thought, how interesting. They're actually going to ban less healthy, i.e. junk foods and drinks, and put very specific regulations in there, how to score these products. And it turns out that the scoring mechanism has been in place since 2011 as to what is a less healthy food or drink. And so they are bringing these regulations in to control those adverts. But at the same time, they are pushing these breakfast clubs. And so I just went down the thought rabbit hole of what are they providing at these clubs? And the final thing that I'll leave you with is a snippet here from the Telegraph. I've blurred most of it out so you can only see the relevant bit. It says, ministers have pushed ahead with the ban despite an impact assessment suggesting that children's exposure to such adverts would cut an average of just 2.1 calories from their diets per day. So all of this happening, and it might not even have a substantive impact anyway. So let me know what you think about all that, the regulations, the food, the responsibility, whose responsibility and job it is, the rabbit hole exploration in general. I will try to link these things below if you're interested to look at them, but this was just something that I had an interesting read in. This is not so much an education on the nutrition itself, just where I look for the law and what I look for the law. And if I were doing it as a case, the kind of avenues I would go down. Obviously, this is not a proper case that I'm working on, so it was more of an interest and an exploration of information than anything else. But I thought you'd find that interesting, so if you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I'll give you time to do that now because you are the only way I grow, and I am accelerating towards 1 million subscribers. I only have you to thank, and I am going to set up some kind of giveaway with products that I think will help people. I'm just about to start. In fact, little bit of a sneak preview of what's coming up here. I am filming a self-defense course for a charity. More about that later, but if you want to sort of get on a wait list or something I can set up for that, do get in touch by emailing contact@blackbeltbarrister.com. I'll put you on the wait list. I would love to sell as many people on that course as possible because it is for a charity that I work with to train with martial arts. More about that much later, but hopefully you'll enjoy the course. Hopefully it'll be useful. Hopefully it'll raise money for them and it will do a lot of good things. So with that, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.